I am thrilled to introduce my panelists. Immediately to my right is Amma Asante, who is a truly wonderful, really talented film director. Her first film was a movie called A Way of Life, which if you haven't seen it, you must go and get it on DVD. It was her directorial debut, as I mentioned, and she won a number of awards at various film festivals and a BAFTA award for Best Newcomer, or for Special Achievement, sorry. Her new film is Belle, which I think is still in theaters here, and is hotly tipped for Oscar success, so you saw it here first.
No pressure.
No pressure, but bring it home. Okay. Elana Nathan is the CEO of Peter Som. She is considered one of the smartest business executives in the fashion industry. She has built the company up from a small brand into a hugely successful global brand. Her achievements include building corporate infrastructure, generating publicity, opening accounts with major retailers such as Neiman Marcus and Saks Fifth Avenue. She began as a lawyer, and we're thrilled to welcome her. Okay, so we're talking balancing business and creative. So it's really about the business realities of pursuing our creative passions. So I'm going to start with you, Amma, and first start with when you are choosing projects as a creative, what influences your choices?
Well, you know what, I mean, it's been different each time. And if I could maybe talk about the two films that I've done so far, because I started off in television, and it's equally as weighty a subject in TV as it is in film. But for me, the first time round, I wanted a calling card. Mm-hmm. I wanted to make a movie that could show my skills and could show what I could do, and that as a female, I could direct as well as any male. And that was it. And anything else that came beyond that was a bonus. Mm-hmm. Second time round, and particularly having won lots of awards and then having won a British Academy Award, the weight is on your shoulders to prove a lot more than that. Okay, now we know you can direct, but we want to know whether you can make a movie that people want to go and see and that will have box office potential. So I knew that I still wanted to be able to make a movie that had something to say. I was looking to work on a project that would have something to say, but to be honest, had to have box office appeal as well, and those two things were equally important to me.
Mm-hmm. And so when you were working on Belle, and you cast Gugu and Bata, was there any pressure to cast a more well-known name?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately this film was going to cost more than 10 times my first movie. It had 3 investors who were putting millions and millions of pounds in each. And, those people were not putting the money in kind of for the fun of my talent. They definitely wanted to see a return on their investment, and thankfully they have it now. But at the time, and when you're tying a film together, seeing that box office return is all very much dependent on how you cast the movie. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to cast somebody who was going to be the right age and would have everything that I needed that was going to be famous. She just didn't exist. That was going to be that box office name. So I always remember something that Martin Scorsese said, which is sometimes you have to smuggle your ideas. And I thought, I'm going to have to smuggle Gugu, who was then, and thankfully isn't anymore, an emerging talent, and smuggle her within the context of an ensemble cast who were going to be British national treasures. They were going to be Oscar nominees or winners in their own rights. They were going to be box office names in their own right. And so to surround her with them as supporting actors, and then let them be the platform that she would stand on to become a box office name. And thankfully, again, that's what's happening.
Absolutely, yeah. She's everywhere. So Elana, can we just start by talking a little bit about Peter Som as a brand and just how it's evolved since your time there?
Sure. I joined Peter 11 years ago. He'd been in business for about a year when I met him. I feel incredibly grateful and lucky every day to work with somebody who's so immensely talented. And it was really important to me from the beginning to harness that talent, to create an environment where he and the other creative people that we work with, our team, which is also amazing, could flourish, and that the business could also flourish, and that it would be a commercial success. So Peter has won numerous awards, been nominated for kind of every award in the fashion industry, and been very, very lucky to have tremendous editorial support and support from retailers all over the world. But establishing that and getting that recognition and evolving a growing business that is also commercial and profitable, it's been a roller coaster, and as it is for many, many fashion brands. So, we've had many evolutions from just working on our own line to Peter also being creative director of Bill Blass to consulting for Tommy Hilfiger. Right now he's consulting for several brands. One of them is Les Copains, which is a multi-billion-dollar, for BVM, multi-billion-dollar Italian business. So we have different revenue streams. Some are just our the clothing that we sell and the other licenses and partnerships that we have. But we also have consulting revenue.
So you've as a brand, you've worked with backers, but now you're sort of fully independent, and you own the company 100%, and you own 50% equity, which is amazing. So tell me how that is, from a financial standpoint, and how, and maybe if you don't mind talking a little bit about when you had financiers versus
Certainly.
when you.
So at the beginning of the business, we had some money from friends and family. And then as the business was growing, every season against the prior, we were sort of doubling in sales. And in order to manufacture, we needed to get money. So we went to our factor in the fashion business. You can get financing from a factor against the orders that you have. But our factor went sort of above and beyond the normal factoring because they believed in Peter and myself. I mean, I went to them and I was like, we have all these great orders, but we need help making the product. And so they did. So that was one step. And then in 2007, we brought in the NRDC, which actually just bought Saks Fifth Avenue and owned Lord & Taylor and Hudson Bay companies as an investor in the business. A year later, the economy collapsed, and we sort of mutually decided, but they were they were the driving force in that we were going to part ways, and Peter and I took the company back 100% at that time. I had given birth a week before this happened to my first child and made my husband move here from Hong Kong and London, where he was based. So I was definitely freaking out in that moment of what I was going to do about this business. But we quickly kind of turned it around, and within a few months, we had established a partnership with a new Italian license that manufactured our ready-to-wear. And then Peter went on board with Tommy Hilfiger and started designing for them. I actually have a slide of Tommy, some of the stuff that Peter did for Tommy. I think it's a third slide. And so Peter, it was supposed to be one season with Tommy, and it ended up being 5. So it ended up being a really tremendous collaboration that really put Tommy Hilfiger back on the map, and really helped our business as well financially. Obviously, gave us overhead and office space and a global platform. So,
as a director, can you ever be truly artistically independent if you also have to take the considerations of your financiers into account? Can you ever really sort of make a movie that sort of speaks to your truth?
Yes, I think you can. And I think that quote that I took from Scorsese has a lot to do with that. I think certainly with Belle, I made the movie I wanted to make, and certainly with my first movie as well. I have to say that my first movie, though it won me lots of awards, made precisely £10,500 in the bank. We were inside every single newspaper. We were, all over magazines. I was winning awards around the world, but we made £10,500, and I'm happy to say that's not the story with Belle. No. So with both films, yes, I have been creatively independent in that sense, but you have to be much more clever about it. It's a harder journey. It's you have to think laterally. as you have to, I think, when you're involved in any creative endeavor. And you have to think about ways of telling your story in a way that also brings commercial value. And I think, as an example, you know, with my first movie, there was definitely a kind of truth that I was operating within. And that truth was the idea, for instance, that hopelessness has a voice too, and deserves a voice. With my second movie, and knowing that it's all very well to be able to make that first movie, but it's no good if only your mother, your brother, and sister go to see it, that I had to find a way to understand, yeah, that's true, that there are truths, hopelessness does have a voice, but ultimately people come to the cinema to escape. Whether it's to learn and escape, you know, whatever else they come for, they come to escape into a world, and you have to take that on board. I do think, though, that you cannot only do something for commercial reasons. So if you're only opting for commercial, if you're only opting for the money, if you're only opting for the box office, I think your audience gets you, and they understand when there isn't a truth to the creativity that you're bringing. So it is a balance. It is definitely a balancing act, and it's definitely possible, but I think it's a lot harder. But I have to say, it's a lot more rewarding as well. When you do it both ways, when you are expressing your truth and you are able to be a box office hit or a financial hit, what that ultimately means is that you're sharing your story with more people. Sure. And as a creative, that's what you want. Absolutely. So ultimately, it is more rewarding. But I can't say that there were not times when I was putting the screenplay together, and also when I was putting the movie together, where my brain was not bursting with trying to work out how to do this in a way that would bring financiers and audiences.
Can I ask you the same question as far as when you're putting together a collection and sort of taking the needs of a financier or even your buyers into consideration and sort of what the public wants?
Well, for us, we have a runway show twice a year, and we put together a collection that's between 32 and 35 looks that walk the runway. And within those looks, that's about a 150-piece collection. We want to make sure it's assorted enough to cover Japan, Chicago, London, Moscow. You know, it's difficult to do that. But we work really hard from the beginning, looking at fabrics together, looking at sketches, to the styling process. We've had seasons where we've worked with amazing stylists also, which is another sort of creative piece of the business in addition to design. And in one collection, for example, we were working with Brana Wolf, who is an amazing fashion stylist, one of the best stylists in the business. And we had quite a strong business in Japan at that time. We still have a very strong business in Asia overall. And the styling nuances of the collection were going to really hurt our business in Japan, I felt. So I had to have this legendary stylist come into my office, and I had to have a conversation with her about this business in Japan and why it was so important. And she got it right away because she is immensely talented and understands these things. And we sort of fixed it, and it had no hiccup in the business. But we're always thinking about it. In 2008, or after that time, the Sun Belt in the United States was much less affected by the economic crisis. So our business started to get really, really strong in the South, which meant that we had to think about fabrication and having things for that lifestyle. So, it's just another thing to think about. But we're always thinking about our customers, and it's very important to Peter as he's developing a collection. But sometimes he and I will sit together and I'll say, well, maybe that would be better for another season. Maybe that would be better for fall, winter instead of spring, summer, and he agrees. So, and in terms of backers, clearly, when people have made a financial investment, whether it's a partnership that we're working on or our Italian partners that we've had, working together to make sure that the creative is satisfied, but also that it can be commercial and successful and profitable, is something that we always strive to do. And I think it goes back to what I said in the beginning, which is creating an environment where creativity can flourish, but also making sure that there are tools around to make it a business success is really the key. And I think that is where Peter and I have a really nice relationship. And I think I've also tried to, work on that issue, like with the CFDA as a whole, the Council of Fashion Designers of America, where I was an advisor to the incubators and the kind of young, newer, even emerging designers than Peter, to talk about those things.
Amma, so you have your next project, or you have multiple. Everyone wants to work with you. But I know that your next project is with Warner Brothers.
Yes, that's right.
Unforgettable.
Yeah.
So tell me how it is now sort of working with a major movie studio.
It's a very different process to being independent and having lots of financiers to kind of have, one studio to please is very different. So it's an extremely collaborative process. I think as an independent filmmaker, you're often kind of, the fear of God is often put into you when it comes to talking about working with Warner Brothers or a studio, or the idea that once you work for a studio you don't have any creative independence and somehow you're selling out. That's actually not the case. And for me, what I'm finding is it's a hugely collaborative process. I have two wonderful producers that I'm working with. So this is the first time I'm working with two producers in this way. I work quite closely with the studio as well. And what I find is that I'm still given the lead creatively. It's just I discuss it with more people, if you like, than when we're doing it independently.
Right.
And I have more feedback. But that feedback, for me, is really healthy, and is, because the first movie was one thing, the second movie was another in terms of audiences. The kind of budget that we're making this on will be
a thriller.
This is a thriller, and it will be a big budget, and so it will go out to a wider audience, and therefore the fact that you have more feedback from people makes sense because you're going to go out to a wider audience. So for me, I found it a kind of incredibly inspiring process, just a really creative process, because ultimately, they do still look to me as the creative head, but I do have all of this business support. I do have the Elanas around me to kind of really support me and make sure that the structure is around me to get this right, from a really commercial point of view. So that just makes me feel very safe and comfortable, despite the fact that obviously, the bigger the budget, the bigger the movie, the more risk you're taking.
Sure.
I've just got a very kind of steady structure around me. So that's what I love about it. I mean, I will go back to doing indie after this as well. And ideally, the idea is to kind of, as a creative, is to mix the two and to be able to do studio and indie as well.
Right.
They're just very different processes, but they ultimately still boil down to you as a creative to be the leader. And ultimately, delivering is still all on your shoulders. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So we have time for a couple of questions.
Hi, my name is Jessica.
Hi.
I was just wondering, as balancing creative and business, has there been a time where an idea or this creative masterpiece, whether it's in the fashion world or in indie film, failed, and how did you overcome that? How did you approach, your investors, or, how did you reconcile that and move forward?
Well, yeah, I mean, commercially, my first movie definitely failed. 10,500, it cost over $1 million to make it. It definitely failed. I mean, I think what it did for me was, it was a success in the sense that it told me that I could complete, and that I could deliver, and that I could hit schedules, and there are certain practical things that I could do. But what it did was inspire me to say, okay, well, I've got those skills, now I have to use them to make money. And it just made me more determined to work on a subject matter in terms of my creativity, and prove to myself and to everybody else out there that I could have a movie hit. So for me, I just tried to use, the thing is, it's about getting up. And I think it is about the failures sometimes. I mean, I think the successes come, certainly for me, from the failures. And so it's just about getting up and continuing and learning from your mistakes.
Amma, I just want to congratulate you on an amazing film.
Thank Thank you.
I really love Belle and I wanted to see it over and over.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So my question is, as you go on to your next film, your team consisted of an amazing star, an amazing writer, all of which are women of color. Will you be able to retain that team for future films?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The history behind the film is that I'm a writer-director, and so I didn't work with any writer on the movie, but the way that the union system works here is that somebody who had tried to make the movie before then got the credit for it. So I am the writer that I usually work with Unforgettable. Yeah, I am the person. I just don't happen to have the writing credit on this particular movie. However, when I go and work on the Warner Brothers movie, I will be working for the first time in my life on a movie with a writer and collaborating with a writer. I am collaborating with Christina Hodgson now, and it's incredible. She's an incredible writer. She's writing something that I could not write myself. In terms of, I want to work with Gugu again and again and again, and I think we'll be a team that keeps coming back. Gugu's working with some incredible talent, and I think there's a benefit in going away and then coming back and working together and everything that you learn. But the team that I would love to build is, again, I'd love to have the Elana in my life. So I'd love to have that producer that I could work with again and again and again. And creatively, I'd love to have a cinematographer and a production designer that I could work with. That's like the team that's closest to me that I'd love to be able to carry on. So I'm certainly, I've become the stalker of my cinematographer, and I have become the stalker of my production designer as well, and I really hope we will work again. But you have to be able to adapt, because they make more movies, and so will Gugu. Gugu will probably make more movies than I will ever make as a writer and a director, because it just takes so long to get a movie off the ground. And so you have to accept the fact that they're often not available and have to be able to adapt and work with other people. But ultimately, I'd love to have that kind of tight team that I could work with over and over.
Thank you very much. I think that's all we have time for.